All right, so what's up there, YouTube? All right, so today we're going to have a little discussion about not just one. I don't want to pick on one person, but I want to look at how, although there is just typically in these videos, you can tell that there's one person that really gets under my craw, and it's not because they have opinions. I want everybody to have opinions. I think opinions are good. I have an opinion. You have an opinion. Everybody has opinions. But every time this guy talks, and you know who I'm talking about, he makes it out like his opinion is fact. And the reason why it's fact is because he doesn't have affiliate links. I don't have affiliate links, so my opinion must be fact also. He goes on and on constantly. I don't have affiliate links, so you don't click my thing. Please like and subscribe. Well, who cares? Like and subscribe. Yeah, I monetize the videos. I want you to like and subscribe because the more subscribers I get, the more money I make if you watch the video. But I'm not making money on the products. I'm not selling you a product. I'm not. If I like the Nikon Z50, it's not because they paid me to like it, or because I got it for free, or because I have an affiliate link. If you click the link in the description below, and you can go, I can make some money if you buy the camera. I don't make anything if you buy the camera. And if somebody else does make money if you buy the camera, good for them. I don't care. I don't think that doesn't necessarily convince somebody that the camera is like, somebody's not going to say, hey, this X product, this Colgate baking soda toothpaste is crappy, but if you click the link in the description below, I'll make some money. So I'm not going to say it's crappy. I'm just going to say it's here it is, try it out. That doesn't happen. I mean, it might happen. I'm sure there's the occasional thing where that does happen, but for the most part, most people are pretty genuinely honest about the cameras, except for one person. One person says that they're junk, and he doesn't recommend junk. So I don't know. To me, it seems like the bias is only on one side. I could be wrong. So let's take a look at some of these YouTubers in question, right? So let's watch Matt Granger here and see what Matt Granger says about the Nikon Zfc. He's not a fan of the camera. He probably wouldn't buy it. He's not the market for it. But what he did say was that his talent, the woman he's taken photos of, she actually played with the camera, really liked it, and said that she would buy it. So it's not for him, it's for her. See, and it's not just for novices. You can be a professional and want that camera if you have a use for it. Now, my guy, my bald tattooed monkey, he said that, I'm going to quote you here because I'm going to play you the video over here. So, in other words, the camera is junk, and the only reason to buy it, it's not an upgrade at all, and the only reason to buy it is if you like the aesthetics. Or it could be because you like, I don't know, shooting video with it. There's a good reason that you might want to get the camera. Just like the Z50. Excellent at shooting video. But I'm going to point out the three ways that it's better and why those ways are better for shooting video. Okay. Number one, I'm going to have to cut this around because I jumped to Matt Granger and now I jumped to this other thing. Let me first do the clips of different people and what they've said about the Z50, because that's what I started it off with. What they've said about the ZFC. So, Matt Granger doesn't recommend the camera if you shoot professionally photography with a Z6, Z7, Z6 II, Z7 II, and the upcoming Z9. He doesn't recommend it as a backup camera, and I agree with him. If you're shooting photography, Even if you're not if you're shooting video, because video is a completely different thing. You don't need that. You don't need to have it exactly the same. It is handy if you're shooting video. Like, let me. If you're not using a gimbal, see, that's why I was getting on other stuff. So what I have here in my hand is the Moza Mini P. It's a gimbal in a little box, right? This thing comes in a box. And it's super light. It's super easy. I love the thing. I use it with my Z50 all the time. It folds out. I don't have to unfold it to show you. It's basically a small version of this. This is the Moza. This is the Moza Air 2. It's basically a small version of this. Now, you might be wondering, you might not be somebody that uses one of these gimbals. You might be like, well, I don't really use a gimbal. What am I going to use that for? I'm a photographer. And okay, if all you shoot is photography, probably the ZFC probably isn't a good camera for you. You'd probably be better off with the Z5, like our Bald Monkey mentioned. Use the Z5. But I'm going to notice something here. You see this little wire? I'm going to talk about something. See this little wire? It's connected to the gimbal. There's a place for this to connect. And then on the end, it's got a USB-C adapter. See the USB-C? Little adapter on it? What's that for? What's this cable for? Oh, it's to control the camera. So I can push a button here on the back, on the handle, and start and stop recording. Right? So that's handy. That seems like a handy thing to have. A button that you could push and start and stop the recording. But you know what else it does? And this is an interesting, a pretty cool thing. On the Z6 and Z7, this thing's dusty. Man, I gotta clean this thing off. On the Z6 and Z7, that little cord, when the camera's off, will charge the camera. That little cord will charge the camera when the Z6 and Z7 are off. That's cool, isn't it? Because what uses the batteries more than photography on these little small cameras? Video. Video will run your battery down faster than anything on these little on these little mirrorless cameras. So to have a bunch of batteries in the handle of this thing, and then when you plug this in, it actually charges the camera. That's great. But you know what doesn't work on the Z50? Charging the camera over that cable, because it doesn't have a USB-C. It's got a micro USB. And I think it charges the camera. I never even plugged it in on this Moza. But because I've only shot it with for short times. I shoot it for a short time. I take it, if I need to change the battery, I take it off and change the battery. But it would be handy. You know what would be more handy? Is if that USB-C charger would charge the camera, would run the camera while it was on the gimbal. Hey, you know what camera does that? The ZFC. Wow, it sounds almost like an upgrade. The ZFC, you can put the camera on the gimbal, plug in that little cable, control the camera with the gimbal, hit the record button, it starts recording on the camera, so you don't have to reach up and touch the camera. And it runs the camera off of the batteries in the gimbal. That seems like an upgrade to me. I don't know. Seems like a pretty big upgrade. If somebody didn't know that it ran the camera off the gimbal, off the thing, then they would be, I don't know, it seems like something that they would be ignorant to that it does. You know, it'd be something that was, hey, this does that, and if I don't know that, then I'm ignorant. Or somebody that just doesn't have any use for video. So I get that. If you don't have a use for video, there's no reason why you would even care about it that much. But you know what? A lot of us do have a use for video. Go to my website, www.dnrfilms.com, and you will see there's a link to my Vimeo page. I have literally hundreds of wedding videos on my video page. I have a separate website full of photos for photography, wedding photography. So I do both photography and video. See, you know, it almost seems like that would be the market for somebody like me. Not somebody that just shoots photos of or uses other people's photos as examples of their work. So I got to change my battery. See, here's another example. Right now I'm making a video. I'm shooting this on the Z50. It has I can see that the battery is getting low on the camera. Now, if I had the ZFC, I could just plug in a USB-C and run the camera off of that. So I wouldn't need to get up and change the battery. Wow, that almost seems like an upgrade, doesn't it? It almost seems like an upgrade. Like, hey, here's an upgrade. You know, it's better than the Z50. I'm shooting with the Z50 right now, so that would make the other camera, the ZFC, better than the Z50 for this purpose that I'm using it right now. Wow, that's amazing. It almost seems like somebody that said it's not an upgrade doesn't know what they're talking about, does it?
Lot of boring math later.
So I changed the battery in the camera. So that's one thing that would be better, is if you didn't have to change the batteries while you're shooting, I don't know, like this. Like I do all the time. I shoot videos like this all the time. But let's look at like if you're walking around with the camera. Now, yeah, I can use that small rig adapter, flip the screen down on the Z50 and use, you know, one of these, which is what I use. Let me get this out of here. I use this little tripod thing. I tilt it like this, and now I walk around with the camera. And, you know, you put the camera on here, and then the camera sticks off to the side, and the screen flips down. Yeah, that's fine if I'm doing vlogging where I'm just carrying it. But it is a little bit shaky because of the image stab. It's got VR in the lens in the 16-50, and it works pretty well. But you know what works even better than the image stab in the 50? The gimbal. That's what the gimbal's for, is to make it more stabilized. Now this is the Air 2. It's a big, heavy gimbal. I use it on my Z6, and I use it on my Z6s, and it's got extra dials and stuff. It's got a lot of stuff for shooting, standing behind the camera and shooting, you know, a bride or a couple. I can do a bunch of different stuff with it, and I can have a heavy camera on it. It carries a lot more weight. But this, on the other hand, this, as I pointed out in one of my videos, when I reviewed this Moza Mini P, you can go to my videos and see where I did a semi review of this around my motorcycle. I walked around with this. I took it out. I threw this in my bag on my motorcycle, because look how small the case is. It's just a little case. I threw it in the bag on my motorcycle, one of the hard bags. I grabbed my camera, threw the camera, the little Z50, stuck it on there, and the Z50 was light enough to where I could use it on that. What it does do, though, is the screen flips down. Well, the stabilizer, basically, the Moza Mini P is basically like this. So if you look at this gimbal, again, this is the back, right? So this is the back side. So the camera's sitting like this. You can't flip the screen down because this bracket, these brackets in the way, and there's not enough room underneath between the top and the bottom of this, between this area, for the screen to flip down. So you can't flip the screen down to see yourself when using the Z50 on a gimbal. So if I'm shooting a bride or a couple and I'm using the Z50, it's not a big deal. I can put it on that gimbal. I can put it on that. I'm standing behind it, so I basically flip the screen up where it's facing. I just have the screen facing me, so I can see what it looks like as I'm shooting. But if I triple click the trigger on the front of the gimbal, it spins around and goes into selfie mode and flips around. Now, you know what would be handy when it flipped around? If I'm shooting, and I know I'm shooting selfies and I'm walking around the camera, if I could flip the screen out to see myself, because I can flip the screen out, that direction of the gimbal is completely open. There's nothing beside it. So I can flip the screen completely sideways and see myself. So if it had a flip screen, that would be nice, you know? You know what camera has a flip screen that's just like the Z50? The ZFC. And it's a little bit lighter than the Z50 also. It's, from what I've read, from what I've heard online, it seems like a really light camera. So that would make it easier to use on the gimbal. So already I've pointed out things that the camera would be very, very good for on a gimbal. It would take the battery, it wouldn't run off of battery power. You could plug in the little cable, you can hit the button and start recording and stop recording with the button on the gimbal. The gimbal's $200. It's not like it's an expensive gimbal. This gimbal, this Moza Mini P, was $200. And basically, it makes the footage, you know, you talk about the Sony, what is that, the new Z10 thing or whatever, that new little, Sony came out with a camera to compete with the ZFC because they saw the ZFC coming out. Let's be honest, it looks like a perfect vlogger's camera. So Sony comes out with basically the same as their 6500 or whatever it was back in the day. Same guts and everything in a small little white vlogger camera with a little, you know, better audio or something on it. But anyway, I sip my coffee. Sony sees the need for the competition coming from Nikon with the ZFC. So the ZFC is it's $100 more than this camera that I'm shooting with right now. I can use the same lens from this camera on it. So technically I could just buy the body only, swap this lens onto that camera. But if I wanted to shoot with two of these at once for another $200, I could buy another gimbal and I can actually have two cameras on gimbals shooting weddings and both of us be running around with the gimbal and get ridiculously good shots. It shoots extremely good with the gimbal. And it's extremely well stabilized. Better stabilization than IBIS, better stabilization than VR in the lens. So you get the best video. So now we've gone from a camera that's considered junk by one guy online to a camera that's better than every camera that I own right now for shooting video with a vlogging camera, for shooting myself and for shooting others, because the battery keeps going. I can plug it in, it runs off the battery off the gimbal. So I'm not having to take it off and change the batteries all the time. It runs off the USB-C. So now it has become an even better camera than any camera that I have currently. And it's the same price of $100 more than the camera I currently use for weddings. I mean, that's a no-brainer. That's not even a comparison, is it really? It's not even really a comparison, is it? I don't think it is. It's a no-brainer. It's a fantastic camera already. Let's add in something else, because this hasn't been discussed too much. It has eye autofocus in video. This camera doesn't do eye autofocus. If I take my glasses off, I can see the box. I'm wearing glasses. I wear glasses, but I can see the box around my face, but it doesn't change to an eye no matter how close I get. It doesn't change to an eye. So the ZFC has eye autofocus in video. So that seems like an upgrade. Now, could they add it on this? Yeah, they should be able to add that onto the Z50. They basically have the same sensor in them, but it's $100 more. So it's a worthy upgrade. I don't fault anybody. If all you shoot is photography, I can kind of see why you'd say, well, this isn't the camera for me. But to call it junk, it's just silly. That's the stuff that people that just are haters do. They just call stuff junk. Look, the Sony, the little Sony camera that they just came out with, it's a rehash of other cameras, and it's got that's not a junky camera. It's not junk. It's a good camera. It's just not for me. It's not the camera that I want. The Z5 it's a fine camera. Our guy said that the Z5 was an incredible camera. It shoots 24p with an extreme crop, a 1.7 crop. It crops way in on the 4K video. It's like virtually useless for video. It doesn't offer anything new for video over the other cameras that are already out that cost less. I don't understand. You may just get a Z6. Just upgrade to a Z6 II. Then you get even better video. There's no reason at all for me to buy a Z5 at all. And he says it's the best camera. He says he was raving about how awesome of a camera it is. So look, Matt Granger doesn't recommend the camera. He doesn't recommend the ZFC if you're shooting with photos with a Z series photography camera, because the button placement's different. And for that, I agree. He even says the Z50 would be a better choice because the buttons are in the same place. I agree with him. If you want a backup camera and you already shoot with two Z7 IIs and you're thinking, well, I'd like to have a nice little backup camera, smaller as a backup, just to have in the bag in case something happens to my cameras, Z50 all the way. It's a great camera. The lenses are inexpensive. You can buy the camera. I think I bought this camera with two lenses used, but it was barely used. It only had like 1,000 clicks or some minor thing. It was nothing. It came with the 16-50 and the 50-250, the zoom lens. I think I paid like $800 for this thing. And it's a fantastic it's a great camera. And in fact, let's see what Taylor Jackson says about it. Here's Taylor Jackson reviewing or giving his first impressions of the ZFC. See what he says about the Z50.
Nikon ZFC is, inside at least, it is a Nikon Z50 for the most part. And the Nikon Z50 is one of my favorite cameras that Nikon or any camera manufacturer has ever produced.
Wow.
Obviously makes it an ideal travel camera. This is the 28 f2.8, which is a new lens that they've just released. This makes a great general walk-around camera, but also makes just a great portrait camera as well.
Look at there. It's his most underrated camera. It's one of his favorite cameras, the Z50. How can that be? Here's a wedding photographer, the content creator and wedding photographer that shoots on Canon right now, by the way. He shoots on Canon. He calls the Z50 his favorite underrated camera. Wow. Let's see. If you're a vlogger, right? And there's a guy out there, Camera Conspiracies. Everybody knows him. I love the guy. He's hilarious. His videos are funny. He does the black and white thing where he acts like he's in the our bald-headed monkey friend tried to copy him a little bit and do the thing like, if you're a Nikon executive, let's put a crap guts into this new thing and call it something new and sell it.
Didn't read it version. Should you buy the Nikon ZFC? There's two clear camps, and I'm not going to just sugarcoat it and say, yes, everyone should buy this. First, the you shouldn't buy it camp. If you're using something like a Z7 II, Z6 II, and you want a APS-C backup body to that camera to use all of the same big lenses in the same way that, when we would have a D850 or a D5, we would often have a D500 as a secondary body. Smaller, lighter, get a bit more reach from your lenses. There you go. I would say no, for two reasons. One, the button layout is different, and switching between bodies, that's just not helpful in the field, to be going from one that has this array of buttons to another one that has the cool retro knobs.
Look at this video from Camera Conspiracies, and listen to what he says. Listen to what he says in this video. He's talking about the Nikon Z50, this little camera that I'm using right here. And he's talking about using it for vlogging, which is what every single video from Camera Conspiracies, just about, on his channel there. He's got one also for food and vegetarian stuff and stuff like that. But on his Camera Conspiracies channel, every single video is about vlogging, walking around with a camera. And he uses cell phones, and he uses cameras, and he uses different things. And he tried, the funny thing is he tried the Z6. He didn't really care for it because it was so heavy, and the distance, and to put a wide enough lens to get a nice wide lens, all this different stuff, and the autofocus wasn't as good and stuff like that. Well, they updated the firmware and got newer firmware after he tested, which made the autofocus much better on my Z6s. It works great. And then they came out with the Z6 II. I don't think he tested the Z6 II because he hasn't tested another Nikon since back when he first did the Z6. Well, everybody kept saying, hey, you got to try the Z50. You got to try the Z50. So he did. So now listen to what he says in his video. Let's watch his video real quick. Just a little section of it versus the XT4.
Right. And the Nikon Z50 on your left. In my initial tests, I'm actually blown away by the Nikon. It's a camera that I never would have even looked at because they only have one lens, basically, the kit lens. They have two, but the other's a zoom, a frickin' super zoom.
So he's surprised about how well the Nikon exposes, how well the exposure's working on the Nikon.
Right there. Versus the Nikon with its 16. Does one have more tone than the other? Even though they're at 3.5, the Nikon should theoretically
actually
have more
compared to the
it's
Fuji.
a longer focal length.
That's the camera that Fuji is the camera that the angry
Let's do a
photographer
quick
really loves. Is
stabilization
Fuji.
exposure
It's
test.
beating the Fuji.
Tricked you.
For this purpose, it's beating the Fuji.
Nikon's so quick
To
on
me.
that. Fuji's doesn't really feel like doing it. I think Nikon leads the industry in exposure, auto exposure. Let's do it, sunshine. Let's do it, sunshine. It's adequate. It's exposing me so much better right now. Wow. I'm wondering if the autofocus is losing me on the Fuji. That's one of the reasons I brought this. How does Nikon handle the shadows? I think it just keeps focus. It's like a Canon. It could be better than Canon.
Wow. He compares it to Canon and says that the autofocus is as good as Canon. Because Canon, we all consider to have the best autofocus. Canon and Sony both are matched for autofocus. So he's talking about the Z50. That's this little camera. The ZFC actually has eye detect in video. And I'll show you that. In Matt Granger's video, he shows eye detect in video on the ZFC. So it has even better eye detect, and it detects eyes further away. But anyway, listen to what he says here at the end.
I'm so curious of their future. What are they going to release? They better have a flippy screen on something.
About that. So your next camera should have a flippy screen. He's talking about putting a flippy screen on a small vlogging camera. You know, it's kind of funny, but he suggests putting a flippy screen on a camera. He loves the Z50, but if it had a flippy screen, it would be better. Hey, that sounds like a ZFC. Z50 with a flippy screen. Speaking of that, I want to bring up something else. Now, in our angry tattoo monkey's first video bashing the ZFC, in the very first one, and I know I keep going back to this stuff, in his very first video, he said that he wants to tell you something that nobody else is telling you because we're all paid shills. Nobody else is telling you something. And the thing that he is so proud to tell you is that the ZFC is basically a Z50. That's what everybody's also told you. But no, it's just the paid shills. The paid shills don't tell you that. But Matt Granger said it's a Z50 in a retro body. Taylor Jackson said it's basically a Z50, which is his favorite camera out of all cameras. But the Z50 is one of his favorite cameras, but it's a Z50 in a retro body. Matt Irwin says it's a Z50 in a retro body. Everybody, Tony and Chelsea said it's a Z50 in a retro body. Everybody says it's a Z. He didn't come out with any new information by telling you that it was a Z50 in a retro body. We know that. We know it's an upgraded Z50. And it's not just the exact Z50. That's what he tries to claim, is that it's the exact same thing as the Z50. It's not. It has autofocus and video, eye autofocus and video. It's got better eye autofocus at a further distance than the Z50. And then the Z6, and it's equal to the Z6 II and Z7 II. It's got a USB charger. I already explained the purposes and the uses of the flippy screen and the USB charger if you're shooting video. That's the main reason to get the camera. Yes, it's a good photography camera, but let's be honest. In these days, nowadays, if you're going around and you're carrying a camera, usually it's this camera, the camera on your phone, right? Most people's cameras on their phones are phenomenal. The Pixel, the Google Pixel and the new iPhone and the newest Samsung phones and even this LG phone, which LG stopped making phones, but this is the V60 Thin Q, takes phenomenal images. phenomenal. They take great images in good light for most people. They've already got a camera in their pocket. The only thing that these don't do very well, and they do okay now, they're starting to do better, is video. Yes, they shoot 4K, and this one shoots 8K video, technically. But the audio is never as good. If you don't have a headphone jack on it and you can plug in a microphone and put a microphone on you, the audio is not as good. It never is as good on a phone. Even this one has video bokeh. It's called video bokeh on the phone, which separates the background noise, kind of tries to do some kind of analyzing in camera to try and get rid of background noise. Even that does not do what a vlogging like the Z50. It does not do what the Z50 does, and that is have really good image stabilization in 4K with a external mic that you can hook up to you and have it actually sound really good. You know, and it just doesn't do it, and it's handy. So the ZFC is a better tool for that use because the video is that much better. And it really is. I shot some video on the phone, and I tried to trick not trick, but I did a comparison. I was shooting with a Z50, and I grabbed my phone, and I got some shots during a wedding. And I got a couple shots during a wedding in 4K 60. I shot these shots in 4K 60 on the phone because I couldn't do them in 4K 60 on the ZFC because it only does 4K 30. It does 1080 at 120. So that's what I usually use for slow motion on the ZFC, on the Z50, and I would use the same thing on the ZFC. But anyway, I shot some footage of a wedding, and I mixed it in the middle of the shots, and I asked a friend of mine, I was like, hey, can you tell if any of these shots are different? And he said, yeah, the shot of blah, 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 where you came up, that looked different. That looked like a different camera. And I said, can you tell what kind of camera it was shot on? And he couldn't tell. And I said, if I told you it was shot on a phone, he said, well, that makes sense. It looks like it was shot on a phone. So he could even tell, slowed down, that it was shot on a phone with image stabilization because it's just the sensor's so much smaller in this phone. No matter what you do, you cannot make the phone look like a mirrorless camera. The sensor's so much bigger. And for photos, if you're taking photos on your phone, I'm sure they're fine. You can upload them to, Shutterfly or wherever, Amazon, whatever, and get and order photo books and stuff like that. But my daughter took photos with her iPhone, and she wanted to make a photo album book. And she made a book the pictures weren't real big. They were like 8x10s. But she noticed the blur, like the edges. She said, why do these photos not look as good as they do on my phone? I said, because the quality on your phone is showing, it's a much smaller screen. When you blow it up to a bigger size, you can see the imperfections in the photo. And she said, well, I don't see that on the thing. And I don't see it when you took pictures with your Nikon cameras. I don't see any of that. I said, well, they're taking a much bigger image. And it's not the size of the image, it's just the quality. It's actually much better, especially when blown up on the DSLR mirrorless camera than it is on any phone. They're getting close on phones, but most people are walking around with this. Now, if they want to take even better pictures, that's what stuff like the ZFC's for. If you're doing photo and you want to take some better video. So those are the main things I want to talk to you guys about today. A little comparison of what people were saying about the ZFC compared to what one guy is saying about the ZFC and why he's wrong. I mean, I don't want to be mean to the guy. I mentioned, I got a lot of comments on my last video, and a lot of people were saying, "Oh, how can you call him insane or whatever?" I said he was stupid or something. I was talking about as it relates to the ZFC and the Z50. He bashes the ZFC and the Z50 to all in and basically said that they're junk. He said they're junk and he can't recommend junk.
Why would I recommend it? Why would I do anything other than give that thing scorn? It's a Z50 body inside of a retro magnesium housing. The Z50 is not an impressive camera. It's not an impressive camera by any means. Not for its price point, not in how it performs. Why would you want it? Why are you giving me flack? And that's fine. I can handle all the flack in the world. Why would you give me flack over that? I don't recommend junk. I don't.
So he doesn't recommend. He said, I don't recommend junk, and I don't recommend these cameras. That's fine. He called them junk. Well, I just beg to differ. To a guy who doesn't use the cameras for what their intended purpose are, doesn't make them junk. Okay. I have no use for a medium format camera. I'm not going to buy a medium format camera because what I do requires me to shoot photo and video. So I'm not going to buy it. But just because I don't have a use for it, I'm not going to call it junk. It's not junk. Fuji does not make a junky camera. Panasonic does not make a junky camera. Sony does not make a junky camera. Canon doesn't make a junky camera. They make a camera I'm not going to use because I don't have a purpose for this, or I don't feel like buying more lenses. I've owned Canon cameras in the past. I've owned Sony cameras. I've owned all different kinds of cameras. Panasonics. I've owned everything. I've owned a lot of different kind of cameras. Not everything, obviously. Can't own everything. But I've owned a lot of different kind of cameras. And none of them were junk. It's just I changed cameras based on my needs. Now, I didn't need... Like, when I shot with Panasonic, I was shooting mostly video. So I needed video mostly. When I shot with the GH... I started with the GH1, GH2, GH3, GH4. I bought all the GH cameras all the way up to GH5. And they were fantastic cameras. But then I started shooting more photography. And my clients wanted photography and video. So I kept video cameras and bought Nikon for photography and started shooting with photography cameras. So I started shooting with the D600 and D750s for shooting, and D850 and D500 for shooting photography. And I would shoot photos on that, and I would use some of the, like if I had a D600 and a D750 and a D850, I would use the D850 for photography, the D750 for photography and video, and the D600 for video. And I would set it up and do video with the D600. But it wasn't, I'd use the D600 and a Panasonic because I could hit the Panasonic and let it roll. Or a Sony. I'd hit the Sony and let it roll. But what I found was I liked the image quality from the Nikon with the big lens and the stuff. I liked the image quality better, even if it was a little bit softer on the Nikon than I did on the Panasonic and the Sony. It's not to say that the Panasonic and Sony were bad cameras or that they shot anything better or they were junk. I just liked the image quality coming out of the Nikon sensors better than on the other cameras. That's all it was. When I shot it, when I edited it back and forth, I liked the Nikon. So my dream was, I was like, hopefully Nikon will come out with a mirrorless camera that has better autofocus and video, so I don't have to constantly focus, because I didn't mind constantly focusing, but sometimes I have to set the camera and leave it. Set it on a tripod, hit record, and then go to another camera. I couldn't do that on the Nikons because they didn't have autofocus, and because they had record limits, and because there was a number of different reasons why I could not just walk away from the camera. And it was a heavier camera, it wasn't good on a gimbal, and all that kind of stuff. Those reasons I wanted Nikon to come out with a mirrorless camera so I could get rid of all the two different styles of cameras to do one job. My job is photo and video. So in order to get, to minimize my collection, I didn't want to minimize. I didn't need to minimize, but I thought it would be nice not to have the Panasonic, not to have the Sony, or not to have the Nikons. If Panasonic or Sony or Nikon came out with, or Panasonic or Sony or Canon came out with a camera that I liked and I already had lenses for it, and I'm like, well, I can just get this and do away with all my other cameras, I would have done that. But I already had several lenses, and I had lenses that Angry Photographer recommended. The Tokina 100mm macro. I bought that based on his recommendation, and it was a fantastic lens. That's why I trusted what he said. And I think he was right about the lens. It was a great lens. He's right about a lot of the lenses. When he talks about lenses, he's right about the lenses a lot of times. Is he right every time? Nobody's right all the time. But he was right, and I trusted what he said. So that's the thing that makes it hard when somebody says something that you trust what they say, because from your experience, they've said stuff that is a positive thing or is right. not a positive thing, but something that's actually right. When it comes down to it, when they say something that's negative, you tend to think, well, he's right. Well, he's not. He has never even held the camera in his hand. He has not held the ZFC. He grabbed the Z50. I think he tried the Z50, but I don't think he did any vlogging with it. He didn't go around trying to shoot with it like for video. He shot photos with it and said, I don't like this camera. It's a piece of junk or whatever. And it's none of them were junk. I didn't get rid of the Sonys and Panasonics and Canons because they were junk. I got rid of them because Nikon came out with a Z series camera that did what I wanted them to do, and that's good video and good photo in one camera, in one body. So I could have 3 or 4 cameras and multi-purpose use them. I could use them for photos, I could use them for video, I could use them as a backup. I could use the Z6 or Z7s for shooting photography, and then pop one on, shoot some video with it, flip the switch, shooting video, flip it back, shoot some photos. And then I got the Z50 for vlogging because I saw some reviews of it for vlogging. I thought, well, that's a great vlogging camera, and it's a great little backup because it has the Z mount. I can throw any of my Z lenses on it and use it in a pinch if something happens to one of my other cameras. It just makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Now, would I use it as my main photography camera? No, I would not. I would not use the Z50 as my main photography. I would get a better camera, bigger batteries, last longer, and all that kind of stuff. Same thing with the ZFC. I'm not going to use it for a main camera. It's a fantastic little vlogging camera. It's a fantastic little, in a pinch, you can shoot some photos with it, and it does good on photos, but mostly for vlogging and for this type of stuff where I can plug it in with permanent power and I don't have to sit here and watch the battery meter drop down until it's turning red, and now I got to stop the camera and replace the battery. That's why I would get the ZFC, and that's its purpose. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean it's junk. Just because it doesn't serve a purpose for you doesn't mean it's junk. Loyalty. If you want to talk about people upset about brand loyalty, that guy is the epitome of somebody that's brand loyal. He's so brand loyal, he tattooed Nikon on his hand when he liked Nikon, and now that he doesn't like Nikon, if he would erase it and put Fuji on his hand, he probably would, because he's brand loyal. He's so brand loyal, he's tattooing himself with the company name. I would never tattoo a company's name on my body, because no company is worthy of putting me advertising for them. I like a lot of different stuff, but I don't like them to a fault. I like them if they serve a purpose for me. If I can do what I need to do professionally and on the side, if I can do what I need to do with those products, then they're useful to me. If I can't, then I get rid of them and I get something that can do what I need them to do. Anyway, that's all I wanted to have a little rant about this stuff. And one more thing I wanted to bring up real quick, and this is something else that kind of eats at my cross sometimes, and I see it from a guy named Jay Christina on here. He's a really good guy. He seems like I like his videos. They're really high quality and all this kind of stuff, and his audio is phenomenal. He uses a really expensive microphone. His audio is phenomenal, but he gets into this thing where he talks about how much money a company makes and how much money a company's losing, and tries to compare it. So like he compared Canon's newest numbers. Canon's in the black, he said, and why isn't Nikon in the black? Well, because Nikon got rid of all their point and shoot cameras weren't selling, so they got rid of them. They tried some things that didn't work, like the key mission cameras that just didn't work, and they weren't as good as the GoPros and other cameras. So they tried some things and it failed, so they lost a lot of money on these things. And with the advent of the smartphone and them taking a while to get into the mirrorless cameras, it's taken them a while to pick back up. They're coming out with the Z9, which is a professional camera, and I would almost put money on it that this thing is going to be a ridiculously good camera. But even as ridiculously good as it is, their profits aren't going to be as high as, say, Canon. Canon also has a whole separate imaging department. I mean, they've got a lot of different things that they make, printers, and I have a Canon printer. They make a lot of different, they're more diversified than Nikon. So Nikon has a lot more catching up to do. Now, just because a company isn't selling as many of a product, if their market share is less, doesn't mean they're worse of a company, right? If that was the case, then the best hamburger joint in the world, on the planet, would be McDonald's. They would have the absolute best hamburgers. Does McDonald's have, they sell more hamburgers than anybody. They have a higher market share of anybody than on hamburgers. So are they the best? Is McDonald's the best hamburger company ever? No. Do they make a good product for inexpensive price? Yeah, they make a decent product for if you're into hamburgers, into their food. But one could argue that a smaller place has about, you could say Wendy's is third, but you could say there's McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's. You could say Wendy's has a better hamburger. They have fresher ingredients. Their meat is never frozen. It's, you could say Wendy's has a better hamburger, and you might like Wendy's more. Does that mean that Wendy's is a worse company than McDonald's? No, it doesn't mean it. All it means is just because something is popular doesn't mean it's the best, right? Just because everybody shoots with the Sony a7 III doesn't mean it's the best camera to shoot with. Just because everybody shoots with a Canon doesn't mean they're the best cameras. I've shot with Canon, I've shot with Nikon, I've shot with Sony, I've shot with all of them. And me personally, I like the images from the Nikon the best. That's my choice. That's what I like. It's like trying all the different hamburgers, and I say, well, I like the Whopper better than the Big Mac. Okay. But does that make the Burger King less or more than McDonald's? No, it's they're companies. Don't be so stuck on how much profit a company's making. That's not a judgment of how good a company is. So the problem that we have with a lot of these YouTubers and a lot of vloggers, stuff like that, is the insinuation that a company, if they're not making as much of a profit as another company, then they must be worse than the other company. Okay. NVIDIA makes way more profit than AMD on video cards, but they're neck and neck as far as quality and the product and stuff like that. It doesn't make NVIDIA a better company than AMD, right? If NVIDIA sells way more graphics cards than AMD, it doesn't mean the NVIDIA graphic cards are better. Some of them are better. Some of them are worse. They're neck and neck. They're almost exactly the same. So, but just because they sell more doesn't mean the insinuation that because they sold more, that means the other company's failing. Just because I make more money doesn't mean you're failing, right? That's the same. It's like a lot of things. It's like taxes. If I pay less in taxes, doesn't mean you pay more in taxes. It means the government takes less money from me, and they have less money to spend from me. It doesn't mean that you have to pay more. It means that they have to spend less. That's what they're supposed to do. But what they do is they tax you and me, and the corporations get cuts, and that's a different thing. We don't want to get into politics. But anyway, I just hope you guys like this video. I don't know, looking at the different reviews and the different things on it, I don't see a huge bias in one way or the other, except for from one guy who calls them junk. To me, seems like that guy's a little bit off the rails, and I always bring it to your attention, and I'm not trying to get a clickbaity ad, or I'm not trying to do anything like that. I'm just looking at the different videos and saying, this is what you guys asked for. You guys got what you asked for. You asked for a flippy screen, you got a flippy screen. You got something that's good for vlogging, that's what you got. It's not going to please everybody, but Nikon has a professional camera that's already been seen at the Olympics. The Z9 is going to be a professional body shooting 8K video and all the extra bells and whistles and super fast and all that stuff and better autofocus and everything. So we'll see what happens in the future. But for now, just get the gear you like, use it, create something fantastic, and share it with everybody so that we can see what you did. All right, YouTube, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching. Have a good day and have a good weekend, and see you later.